Hey folks, the sheer amount of mind-blowing information in the latest Zelda game, Tears of the Kingdom, is crazy. It's overwhelming how many cool bits and pieces of lore there are to learn, from smaller subtle things such as engravings on blades to much, much deeper bits of lore such as the history of the depths. Get it? Because they're literally deep pieces of lore? Deep depths? Okay. Throughout my entire adventure from day one up until now in the present day, as I continue to play this amazing game, I've been taking note of every bit of lore I've found interesting, cool, or noteworthy, and that list is growing pretty big now, so I felt it's time to make a video. Because you know, I guess that's what I should do as a YouTuber. Now please keep in mind, I do not consider myself an absolute expert when it comes to Zelda lore, more just a massive obsessed fan who loves talking about the games. If I make a little mistake, feel free to correct me, as well as feel free to add on to anything or bring up bits of lore I haven't in the comments. These bits of lore can be things that build on what we already knew, new pieces of lore entirely, and even just little bits and pieces I find really cool. So let's look at 100 interesting bits of lore in Tears of the Kingdom. Oh, and it goes without saying that this video will contain both major and minor spoilers for Tears of the Kingdom. Watch at your own risk, or come back to this later on. I appreciate you either way. This video is great for having something on whilst you work, clean, cook, or study, or even just want to watch a super long Zelda video. This video has also taken a fair amount of work, and I wouldn't be a proper YouTuber if I didn't politely ask now that if you'd like to support my fabulous Zelda content, then subscribing to the channel would be massively appreciated, as well as dropping a wee like down below. With all of that out of the way, get comfy, and as always around here, be sure to go and grab yourself a snack or drink and send them in via Twitter, Instagram, or Discord to get featured right here. And let's get into this one. One of the first bits of both new and returning lore, but more so new, was the appearance the Zonai people take on. Those first steps down deep below Hyrule Castle were overwhelming with information and action. When it got too much, Zelda wouldn't even let me go back upstairs to the castle. Like, come on man, it's scary down here. It amazed me so much in that very moment that Nintendo actually developed the Zonai from the very little we got in Breath of the Wild to being a major part of this game's story and lore. This one is obviously hard to miss, but I guess if you're like me and sometimes speed through the text, you may have actually missed this in the opening of the game, but I doubt that, and it's more of just a good way to open this video. Not too far after the last discovery, we find the crusty corpse of Ganondorf. A cool bit of lore here is how he knows Link and Zelda's name right off the bat. The lore and backstory throughout this game can get quite confusing and easy to miss certain details, and this was one I didn't fully pick up on until later on. King Rauru, over 10,000 years ago, told Ganondorf in the most badass fashion to remember the name Link, a swordsman with the sword that seals the darkness. For Ganondorf, in the blink of an eye, thousands of years pass just as he said they would, and he finally meets that swordsman by the name of Link right here. Knowing his name and recognizing that the Master Sword is that which was said to seal the darkness. I love these details in the conversations during the opening of the game. It especially hyped me up for what was in store later on in the game. Another thing I found incredibly cool about the whole Ganondorf taking a wee break below Hyrule Castle is that later on in the game, you can actually discover that Hyrule Castle was originally built with the purpose of imprisoning and hiding the dark secret that lays deep below. If you explore Hyrule Castle's underground tunnels, you can discover a stone with text inscribed on it that reads, "Deep beneath this land, our mighty first ruler imprisoned the Demon King. To ensure the king's magic would hold, we erected a castle here to protect this sacred site." Hyrule Castle's original purpose was to protect the seal King Rauru placed on Ganondorf. I was mind-blown when I read this for the first time, and it still amazes me that this deeper piece of lore is insanely easy to miss if you don't happen to explore down here and read this text. The Sky Islands are stunning, that's a fact. But the lore behind them is honestly quite remarkable. Have you ever wondered why they are there? We don't see them in the Memories of Zelda, so it's not an ancient times thing. At least not at this stage. Well, an interesting bit of lore that you can easily miss if you don't return to a certain location is what you learn from the Legend of the Great Sky Island side quest. There isn't anything to prompt you or direct you here when it becomes available. It's just by chance if you happen to return. Here, you can take part in a ceremony and be rewarded with the Zonai fabric. In doing this, the construct that takes you through it all will explain exactly why these islands are in the sky. They explain that they were told that the hero who will defeat the Demon King will one day awaken here at this very site, and in order to keep him safe from the Demon King, this site was raised to the heavens. It's interesting as this isn't explained by Rauru or any of the main characters, which I honestly thought it might be, but rather this information is found via this side quest, which is pretty fun, I must say. King Rauru is without a doubt a lovable character in my opinion. He's the true father figure of Zelda in my headcanon. Now, a cool bit of lore you might have missed, especially if you haven't played some of the older Zelda games, is that his name is actually already familiar. The Sage of Light seen in Ocarina of Time, Rauru, is where this name first appeared in the Zelda universe. In that game, he appeared as an owl out with the Sacred Realm, and within, he appeared as an elderly Hylian man. Personally, I don't think they are one of the same. I believe they may hold some form of connection or bloodline, but that's about it. Either way, it's a neat bit of lore you might have missed if you haven't played Ocarina of Time. Lore can be both serious, but also funny, and a massive, substantial, timeline-binding piece of lore that absolutely blew my mind is that it is canonical in the Zelda universe that cheese was considered ahead of its time. Cheese. Even as a highly lactose intolerant person, this had me pretty hyped, and running to the bathroom. In a very fun side quest found in Hiteno Village, you can learn that Koyin's grandfather hid this recipe for Hiteno cheese in a bottle, with the words, "can't name, too early," being mentioned. This man knew Hyrule was not ready for his cheese. This is hands down the best bit of new lore to think about. The Sky Barrier has been a known thing in the Zelda series for a good while now, most famously seen in Skyward Sword as a layer of protection between the Sky Islands of that time and the dangerous surface. It was broken in small holes to allow Link to travel down there in that time, and at that time it was the only way to break through the thick cloud. However, in Tears of the Kingdom's lore, we once again see what appears to be a cloud barrier. A thick layer blocking the surface from sky. And going back to that earlier point about why the Sky Islands rose, this could make sense. However, in this time frame, following Link sending the Master Sword back in time for Princess Zelda to restore it and strengthen, among many other things, she, now as the Light Dragon, bursts through the sky barrier of this time, setting down some new lore and breaking this famous barrier. I'll admit that this one is a bit more debatable as to if these sky barriers share the same qualities, but that is how I've interpreted this. The emergency shelter found below the lookout landing is such a cool expansion to the existing world. We know this secret chamber did exist in the time frame of Breath of the Wild, despite not being reachable in the actual game. The guards in Tears of the Kingdom tell us that its purpose was for quick escapes in case of emergency, such as the Calamity. So the cool bit of lore here is that now knowing this exists, it was very likely used in some way, shape or form during this horror event. I like finding out cool details about past events such as this one. The deep lore of the depths, get it? Deep lore. I'm here all night, folks. The deep lore of the depths is crazy. From the bargainer statues to the abandoned mines. There is a lot to discover down here, and there will be a few bits and pieces of lore on this list focused on the depths. For this first one, I had a very big oh moment when I eventually realised that the depths is a literal mirror to the surface of Hyrule. For a while, I had a little hunch, as wherever there was water, there was a wall down here. But it took me a solid 40 hours or so before I actually realised the depths is an actual mirror. Wherever there is a mountain on the surface, there is a drop in the depths, and vice versa. Water above creates walls below. It's pretty cool. Bouncing off that last point, to extend it, there isn't just the mirroring of the map, but also that the shrines of light that are all directly above the light roots even share names, but in reverse. Pretty cool, right? I think there may be some more lore behind why this is, but that's a topic for another day. The switch from Sheikah tech to Zonai tech between Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom was very refreshing in my opinion. Functionally, it's similar, but different enough in design and lore to feel right. A cool piece of lore that builds on the Sheikah tech from Breath of the Wild is the explanation as to what happened to it, or lack of explanation to be honest. The Divine Beasts, Towers, and Guardians have all been removed, but it isn't explicitly stated why. However, there are hints. The Divine Beasts and Guardians are fairly self-explanatory. They nearly caused the downfall of Hyrule despite being regarded as the kingdom's method of defense. I'm sure they were destroyed and or buried to avoid that potentially happening again. A lot of former Sheikah shrine sites now have a rough patch of stone or dirt, presumably meaning they were buried, and others now have chasms in place. It's development on existing lore, which is a lot of interpretation, and I do wish it was stated more explicitly, but it's still some cool lore. Before the upheaval took place, Hyrule was in a better place than it was post Breath of the Wild. Rebuilding plans had begun, people felt more safe, and life was improving. However, the tragedy that struck the kingdom over 100 years ago has not been forgotten. Zelda herself actually went around the kingdom far and wide, and left her recognition and thoughts with those who fell due to the horrible events which took place in the form of these touching memorial stones. You can find them across the kingdom with a silent princess flower atop them. They're heartbreaking to read, but very touching. The horn statue that we first met in Hateno Village was a very interesting part of Breath of the Wild. It was essentially an evil Hylia statue, a demon trapped within who could swap your hearts to stamina vessels, and vice versa. An interesting thing I noted down and definitely want to discuss in full length at some point is the fact that the statue has moved halfway across the map, now being found below Lookout Landing. The lore of this statue was already fascinating and now made even more with the development that it can move. Bargainer statues are so intriguing. They hold some sort of connection to Hylia and Hylia statues, evident by dialogue during the Great Plateau questline, but also due to the fact they all reside directly below Hylia statues. Even this one here, despite the fact there is no Hylia statue on the surface, but rather in the sky within the Temple of Time. This is prime real estate in terms of new lore. If you've played a decent amount of the game, then you've probably come across at least one. If not yet, or in case you walked past one and missed one, then definitely get yourself down to the depths and discover this truly fascinating new lore. The lore of the giant, unmissable geoglyphs is unique. We know they originate from Zelda's Tears as the Light Dragon. However, those tears landing on the ground didn't just form these glyphs. It's a missable explanation, but Impa actually tells us about it during the Dragon Tears questline. She explains that whilst now they are fully visible, that is because in ancient times there were some people, the ancients, who found what they referred to as dragon tears, and it was those ancient people who marked down the images, creating the geoglyphs, which is why as part of the upheaval they've now appeared again. For the longest time, I just assumed that Zelda's tears alone created these markings, but I was wrong. The lore is that the ancients of ancient time actually made the markings. This would also mean they must have been able to view or sense the memories in some sort of way in order to create the matching designs. Very interesting. The process of dragonification is a crazy concept in an already crazy video game universe, and this new insane lore to the series is something I absolutely love and am here for. I guess it's very hard to miss out on this lore unless you happen to avoid the memories or haven't fully done them yet, and don't mind being spoiled for videos. The chances are you didn't miss this one, but let's be honest, it's way too cool to leave off a lore focused video. The famous Yiga hole from Breath of the Wild is somewhere I instantly wanted to check out prior to the release of Tears of the Kingdom, as in the previous game we knew it had a bottom of some sort. There was a shrine puzzle in which we had to drop a Sheikah orb into, meaning there was Sheikah tech down here. However, now in Tears of the Kingdom, the lore developed and it's now one of the new chasms as seen across the kingdom. Does this mean the shrine puzzle part was perhaps removed with the upheaval, or is this just a minor development change? Either way, I found it pretty cool in terms of lore. The dungeons of this game are good. A big improvement from Breath of the Wild if you ask me, and a lot of that is thanks to their themes alone. Not you. One of my favourites is the first one I took on, the Wind Temple. A fun piece of lore which is revealed in dialogue is that the large wind arc that makes up the dungeon was, up until now, nothing more than a song for kids. Chulin even tells us this. A legend to tell of a flying ship, now a reality to witness. The Forgetful Temple- wait, no, that sounds wrong. The Forgotten Temple. I wrote that wrong in the script. The Forgotten Temple is an extremely interesting place when it comes to lore. Even in Breath of the Wild, it was heavily theorized about and looked into in terms of lore. Now in Tears of the Kingdom, this location's lore has developed massively. Behind the now collapsed Hylia statue is an open door which leads us to a room we see in Zelda's memories. This is where the ancient sages make their vow to King Rauru, as well as where Rauru kept the secret stones. In the modern day, it also contains a map of ancient Hyrule, evident by the Julian Peaks not being split yet, which is a separate piece of lore we'll talk about later in the video. In here, you can actually see the order in which the geoglyph should be discovered in order to view the memories in chronological order. You by no means actually have to come here and take notice of this, but it's definitely worth it if you ask me. I love that the lore of this location developed like this. The Forgetful Temple. What a place. The Lomai Labyrinths were already fascinating in Breath of the Wild with their lore and mysteries. Are they actually of Zonai origin? That was a big question in the previous game, and the lore surrounding these free landmarks has expanded massively. We can now explore two new counterparts to the base labyrinth, a sky counterpart and an underground counterpart, with further developments in connection to the Zonai as seen with the dragon rings with the Zonai hand symbol. I haven't delved fully into this one yet, but I felt it was very much worth knowing. The people of Hyrule are the life of this game. There are returning characters and brand new ones, which is extremely interesting as some of them have definitely only just showed up sometime between the end of Breath of the Wild and beginning of Tears of the Kingdom. They aren't new because of the upheaval like a lot of structures and geographical changes. These newcomers are literally just outsiders that we didn't see in Breath of the Wild. Some are easier to miss than others, but to note my favourites, you've got Yona, Taro, Pen, Yosha, and many more. It's not exactly deep lore, but I am curious as to where they all came from. I'm sure some could be played off as we're just never in the same place as them at the same time, such as Yosha. However, characters such as Yona literally have a character description that mentions she's from another domain, meaning there is more out there. I want to explore wherever Yona and the others are from, but for now, it remains as mysterious lore. Perhaps we'll see it in DLC? The famous 8th heroine statue has been theorised and speculated about ever since the release of Breath of the Wild, focused on the identity of who this 8th heroine was. Well, in Tears of the Kingdom, this lore is actually explained in full through a long, but very worthwhile side quest. Rotana of Gerudo Town can give you this quest, and in doing so, you'll discover the truth of the mysterious 8th heroine. He is unnamed. However, it is revealed that among the 7 Vi Gerudo heroines who were caught in a difficult battle, a Vo came to their aid and helped them out. They tried to praise him highly enough to be allowed entry to Gerudo Town, but their laws forbade it. Thus, they honoured that Vo in the form of being the 8th heroine and left a reward in the statue of the 8th heroine room. We don't know who that hero was, but we do know that he is a Vo. Could it be a previous Vo with the spirit of the hero? We can't say for sure, unfortunately. But it's so awesome that they developed this lore. The spirit within the Blade of Evil's Bane, Fi, lives on. This piece of lore is so relieving, as when we saw that the Master Sword would be going through it prior to release, I was concerned that this would harm or even kill the spirit within, Fi. We don't see them again, as we know Fi sealed themselves within the blade at the end of Skyward Sword. However, we do see the blade glow and even communicate with Zelda on multiple occasions. It appears as though Zelda can actually understand the blade at times, which I guess would make sense given her goddess bloodline connections. This bit of lore made me so happy, and it really developed on what we saw in Breath of the Wild. A bit of lore surrounding Ganondorf next. In Ocarina of Time, we face off against Twin Rova, a two-piece battle against Kotake and Kyume, the surrogate mothers of Ganondorf. Now in Tears of the Kingdom, we saw 2 unique characters always by Ganondorf's side, slightly different from the rest. These 2 are masked and have skin tones more similar to Ganondorf's, one wearing a blue cape, the other red, just like we saw Kotake and Kyume's suit in Ocarina of Time. This could just be a little reference, but my interpretation of it was a canonical lore implication. The place in which we started Breath of the Wild is changed a little bit in Tears of the Kingdom. The Shrine of Resurrection is now a hollowed out cave of what it was not too long ago. This is of course an effect of the upheaval, but what's very interesting here lore-wise is where the spa bed Link was relaxing in at the beginning of Breath of the Wild, there is now a puddle of water in the exact same spot. A little nod to the shrine's previous purpose? Most likely yes. But that's not the interesting part. What is what lies deep below all of this in the depths. The secret spring of revival. And if you enter its water, it actually heals Link. Which is normal for hot springs in Zelda games, but is this the source of the specific water used when the Shrine of Resurrection was being used on Link? It's a very curious bit of lore that is easy to miss if you don't discover this location and realise what it's directly below. The ancient Zonai dive ceremonies are one of my favourite little bits of new lore. These challenges are how Link acquires the glide gear. The lore behind why these exist is pretty cool too. The constructs can explain to you that these ceremonies exist as trials that test courage, in which marking a Zonai youth coming of age. Those who succeed are rewarded with a special outfit, the glide gear. Typhlo Ruins, formerly considered a very much Zonai set of ruins, were a landmark in Breath of the Wild due to its mysterious black fog. However, in Tears of the Kingdom, that's cleared up and you can take on an educating side quest here. You need to help the Zonai research team to uncover the secrets of these ruins, and the conclusion of this questline teaches you the origins of Typhlo Ruins. And my sweet Hylia, they are fascinating. We learned that these ruins were made in honour of King Raru's sacrifice in sealing the Demon King, and that the ruins were actually built by the people of Hyrule. These ruins aren't actually Zonai, rather, they're Hyrulean. This is of course because at the time in which Raru made his great sacrifice to seal Ganondorf, the Zonai people were long gone outside of himself and his sister. So yeah, Hyruleans had to have built this place. How cool is that? Constructs are lore heavy in a few ways, one of which we'll discuss later in the video, but for this point I want to highlight the Construct Factory. It can be found slightly north and in the depths from the Zonai ruins. We visit here as part of Mineru's questline, but this place's existence is significant to the Tears of the Kingdom lore. This is where many constructs would have been created. A lone caretaker construct at the top who still remains after however long this site has been abandoned tells Link that duties have been suspended. However, its purpose was to oversee the task of assembly, also mentioning that shipments to Dragonhead Island were part of their operation. It's sad to see this one lone construct still here, but it all adds to the new lore of the Zonai and their constructs. The new Blood Moon scene is such an upgrade from the original. Zelda is now in there and sounds so cool. Puppet Princess Zelda's storyline through this game is really cool as well. People reporting odd sightings of the princess and doing questionable things, when in reality, it was never actually Zelda. Rather, a puppet formed by Ganondorf, and this storyline concludes at Hyrule Castle. As Ganondorf reveals, she was just a puppet, and we get this absolute baddie smile. This sent shivers down my spine, man. Anyway, something really interesting that happens following this is that future Blood Moon scenes will now be silent and without Princess Zelda, adding to the Puppet Zelda lore. The history of the Zonai has been put in a bit of a confusing place with the developments this game made on them. Previously, they were presumed to have been a barbaric tribe from Faron. However, we learn from Zelda's memories that the Zonai we see definitely aren't barbaric, nor is their architecture. It's pristine and fine. However, what we saw in Breath of the Wild felt the opposite, even with being a bit old and dirty. An interesting detail in Zonai architecture can be seen at the Tobio's Hollow Chasm. Here, we see the pristine Zonai designs from ancient times, holding up, but with the newer ruin design on top. This means that the original Zonai designs were built over, or at least by the looks of it. Question is, was this done by the same Zonai of Raru's time, or were there in fact a barbaric tribe at some point in history who built over the Zonai ruins? It's a confusing one, but a cool bit of lore to think about. The torch. I was both looking forward to and dreading this one, as it always makes me a bit emotional. When Princess Zelda fell at the beginning of the game and vanished into the ancient past, she dropped her torch. When you decide to come back here, either out of curiosity or through the story towards the ending, you'll come back to this very spot, and after jumping down into this hole, you can actually find the very torch that Princess Zelda dropped at the beginning. This is definitely on the minor side of things, but it's a cool attention to detail. Speaking of cool attention to detail in terms of lore, the grave of King Rome in Breath of the Wild, found atop the Hylia mountain on the Great Plateau, was a cool discovery. Now in Tears of the Kingdom, we can find that there is now also a claymore planted next to his grave. This is really cool and interesting, as we saw that he used this weapon in the Age of Calamity spin-off game. Link can canonically now drink booze. Yup. Do you remember that heavily implied to be alcoholic beverage from Breath of the Wild, Noble Pursuit? Well, Link can now make his very own, and even learns the recipe from Gerudo Town. It makes sense, as if he was 17 in Breath of the Wild, he would definitely be over the age of 18 and be able to drink heavier drinks such as cocktails now. And don't worry Americans, he's pretty likely to be over 21 as well now. It's time to party. Gloom is not Malice. This is an easy confusion that even I myself made for a little while. Whilst appearing similar and acting similar, they are actually different things. Malice is a mindless gloop, whereas Gloom is a much more concentrated form of pure evil. I guess you could consider Malice a weaker or diluted version of Gloom. Gloom can make people ill, it can destroy heart containers, and it can even spawn this horror show. Whereas Malice just isn't that strong, but it is sludgy, I guess. Maybe it was just Ganondorf making slime, I don't know. I found it interesting to learn the difference anyway, once I started playing. The holy grail of the Zelda universe is missing once again. The Triforce didn't appear in Breath of the Wild, nor Tears of the Kingdom, with the exception to it briefly appearing as Zelda used her sacred powers. But that wasn't the Triforce itself, just a sign of it. Maybe? I don't know. We see old carvings of it across Hyrule, but even then, it's not many. Has this relic truly fallen into legend, or is it still out there somewhere? Or within someone? I guess this bit of lore is more of a lack thereof, but it's definitely interesting to wonder what's going on with it. The Imprisoning War lore in Tears of the Kingdom is arguably the biggest talking point regarding lore in this game. It is throwing a bit of a problem when it comes to the timeline. Now, let me say now, I don't really care about the lore being messed up or whatever. I welcome it and whatever Nintendo want to do with the game. It isn't a big deal to me. However, it is still a big piece of lore that is being changed up. So prior to this game, the Imprisoning War took place following Ocarina of Time and before A Link to the Past in the Downfall timeline. However, in Tears of the Kingdom, it now takes place long before all of that, in an ancient time before Hyrule was even founded. So what's the deal here? Has the Imprisoning War lore changed? War lore, that's fun to say. Or are there two separate imprisoning wars now? Or is it something else entirely? We do not have an answer just yet, but this is by far one of the most interesting and confusing new bits of lore this game has added. The existence of the Fire Temple hints at a lot of lore regarding the Gorons. Off the bat, it has the title of Los Gorondia Rediscovered, meaning this is a former Goron settlement of sorts deep within Death Mountain, which would line up well with past installments which also show the insides of the mountain to contain settlements or industrial setups. Both actually. This means at some point in history, this part of Goron life was lost and is presumably completely unknown to the current population of Gorons. The items we can find through the old maps were previously add-ons to Breath of the Wild, not part of the base game, so easy to write off as not canon. However, they are now base game items, making them canon, right? Well, it's been debated by fans quite a lot, but I personally believe it does canonize them into the lore. It works fine in my opinion. You're essentially finding relics that belong to former heroes. It's cool, and I like it personally. Fan favourite Bird Boy, not you. Not you. Cass did not return in Tears of the Kingdom. Nobody really knows where he went exactly, but there are some brief mentions of him. For example, Pen, our new friendly bird boy, still not you. actually mentions Cass very briefly, referring to a famous bard, whilst telling Link that one practiced his craft here, at a location we did in fact meet with Cass at in Breath of the Wild. Cass's family don't tell us about his whereabouts either, so the lore around Cass and what he's up to is a bit of a mystery, but at the same time, a pretty cool development from the previous game. Zora's domain has a lot of water, now in Tears of the Kingdom being combined with problematic sludge coming from an island high above. This island is the Water Temple, which contains the Great Wellspring of Hyrule, and a very cool piece of lore about this is that all of this water seen here is said to be the source of all of Zora's domain's water. Pretty straightforward I suppose, but interesting lore regardless. Sage's Will are a collectible key item which can be used to enhance Link's Sage abilities. There are 4 for each upgradable Sage. However, lore-wise, what exactly are they? Well, their description reads that they are remnants of a former Sage's resolve. My question for the lore here is, did the Sages leave pieces of themselves with intent, or did this just happen after they died? I'm really curious to learn more about the lore of the Sages and their respective wills. Could they be perhaps connected to literal wills? I'm not sure, but a bit of lore about them being the remnants of former Sages is pretty interesting. The existence of the Tunic of the Depths and its headpiece and leg piece is curious. Link can acquire them from the Bargainer statues in exchange for pose. However, why does this armour exist in the first place? It adds gloom resistance to Link, which in my mind would imply that at some point in history, these were created in order to protect against gloom, meaning whenever they were created, gloom did lurk in the depths at least. It's a mysterious one that relies on a bit of implication, but it's interesting lore-wise to me. I believe it means they were created long ago for those exploring the depths in ancient times, perhaps when the mines were active, perhaps I'm entirely wrong. Who knows? The existence of Zonai capsules and parts must mean that way back in the day, these parts were regularly used by the Zonai people. I mean, why else would they actually exist? I doubt they were made just for Link. In terms of the lore, my mind imagines that back when the Zonai were thriving, they were actually cruising about on their own builds using these parts, which would make a lot of sense as they were said to be a highly advanced civilization, and stuff like this does scream highly advanced civilization to me. Link's house, now Zelda's, and or potentially Link and Zelda's house, is a pretty intriguing bit of developed lore. Previously, this was Link's house and that was it. But now in Tears of the Kingdom, it appears as though Zelda has moved in, evident by her photos, an NPC cleaning literally saying Zelda lives here, as well as the fact she has a secret room down the well out back. But do they live together? Well, there is only one pillow on the bed, but Link can sleep in it, which he can only do so in beds he owns or has permission to. We know Link is Zelda's personal knight who does not leave her side, so it would appear as though they do live together. And a final bit of evidence for those hard anti-Z-Link fans, according to many of you in the comments of a recent video where I actually talked about this house, many of you mentioned that in the Japanese version of the game, some text from Zelda's diary translates to our house in regards to the home. This is from the point of view of Princess Zelda. That's evidence enough if you ask me, if true, but I'm sure like a lot of Zelda lore, this will be interpreted differently by many. The dark skeletons of the depths caught my interest pretty recently actually. I've been in and out of the depths as I go and only recently really came across them and took note. What caught my eye is that they are all directly below the locations of the Great Leviathan remains as seen in Breath of the Wild, at least the ones that are titled as locations. Is there perhaps a connection there? It would seem so, but as to what, it's hard to say. The remains found in the depths appear to be similar, but not the exact same. In size, yeah, they're more or less the same, but these dark skeletons seem more like dragon remains in my opinion, whereas the surface skeletons are more Leviathan-like. I don't think there is much behind this, but it's a neat little bit of depth lore to know. Maybe it was done just to add to the mirroring of the surface map. A safe assumption, but still cool bit of lore to know, is that Princess Zelda was in the process of rebuilding Hyrule prior to the upheaval happening. We can learn this from a few sources. Her character profile outright says it for starters, but also evidently across the kingdom. Castletown had foundations laid out to rebuild some of the homes. She talks about it in her diary, as well as mentions how she was a big part of building the new school in Eternal Village. Progress was being made before yet another hot, baddie evil man showed up. I mean, I'm not complaining, but at the same time, give them a break, man. Don't need to give me a break, but Give Hyrule a break, sir. The lore of Tears of the Kingdom goes deep in many different ways, but what I didn't expect is the ways the Yiga have developed, from disguising as trees to trying to master Zonai builds. But the one thing that absolutely takes the monster cake is the Yiga Kuko. The all-clucking Kuko side quest has you work for a talking Kuko, just for it to be revealed as a Yiga member in disguise. Yiga lore goes hard for real. Dinral, Nadra and Farosh are majestic dragons we first saw in Breath of the Wild and now again in Tears of the Kingdom. Many theories connecting these free dragons to the Golden Goddesses were popular. However, there is now more lore to add to the theories that could change or add to them significantly. We learned for the main story that gulping a secret stone has major effects on you. It's a forbidden act according to Minoru, and what it does is turn one into an eternal dragon. One would lose themselves for this, and whilst it is forbidden when Zelda arrives in the past, sometime before that time frame, likely when the Zonai were a lot more prominent, it was allowed. You can find free armor sets in the game as well. The Ember, Frostbite and Thunder armor, all said to once have been used for ancient ceremonies, all having a headpiece that resembles the free dragon seen. Dinral, Nadra and Farosh. It's highly likely that these free dragons were once Zonai people who took part in the ancient ritual. Perhaps they were three key figures in Zonai culture given their godlike statuses as dragons, and their connection to the Hylia statues. It's easy to miss this as you need to put two and two together. I didn't realise it at first, but mate, when I did, mind blowing. I was mind blowing. In the Dragon Tier memory, fealty, Ganondorf is seen giving fealty to King Rauru, swearing his loyalty and allegiance, ending the conflict we previously saw. However, this was a false promise, and Zelda instantly recognised this, as well as Rauru. In fact, Rauru was smart here as he thought it was best to keep his enemy close. Though, was it smart? It cost him greatly. Rip Sonia. Anyway, a cool bit of lore that came to mind after watching this is that the scene parallels that of Ganondorf's pledge of allegiance to the King of Hyrule seen in Ocarina of Time, in an almost one-for-one situation. Ganondorf had been a bit of a troublemaker beforehand and then swore fealty to the King, only to stab him in the back and take over. The parallels in these scenes are crazy deep and very cool. Even Zelda sensing the dark intent within Ganondorf is something she picks up on instantly in both games. This was definitely done with intent and is really cool. Hey, welcome to number 50. Congrats on reaching the halfway point of this video. Here's a fun fact about me to reward your efforts. Many of you know that Twilight Princess is my favourite video game of all time, but that extends beyond just playing and talking about the game. I live, breathe and even sleep Twilight Princess. That last point being a bit too literal as fun fact about me, I have Twilight Princess bedsheets. This is where the magic happens. Now for the 50th piece of lore on this list. We can learn that post Breath of the Wild, Link was actually extremely on the ball with his night duties. You'd think he'd get some form of a break, but no. As Zelda wrote in her diary, she said that Link's actually been working a ton, so much that his champion's tunic has been getting really dirty and worn, which is what led her to make a new one and hide it in the throne room as a surprise for him. This is such a cute, caring piece of lore that I really love. Beneath the well of Kakariko Village is a dark bit of lore. In Ocarina of Time, the bottom of the well led to a secret and eerie place. Also in the underground of Kakariko Village lies the Shadow Temple, a torture chamber that was used by the royal family. In Tears of the Kingdom, the well here appears to be a bit of a reference to this dark past of the village. Blood splattered on the outside and then the walls on the inside, all whilst a young child can be found down here cooking, not knowing the dark secrets all around. My mate Triforce Trends has a brilliant video discussing this topic in detail if you want to check that out, link below. The existence of Kilton's brother, Colton, raises an interesting point. We know Kilton is said to be Hylian, as he is categorised in the Creating a Champion book. Presumably his brother is also Hylian then, but what this makes me wonder lore-wise is, does this mean there is a family who are Hylian but take on this unique design that Kilton and Colton do? I love their look, and would assume the look is to do with their monster obsession. Regardless, I found it really interesting that Kilton has a brother now. The spirits that hold pristine weapons as well as the Poes in the depths must share a connection in my mind. Poes are spirits/souls. These phantom figures are presumably some form of spirit. The lore hasn't been made outright clear about what exactly these figures are, but my personal thoughts for this lore is that these spirits are souls that were lost in the calamity, offering the weapons they died with during the horror show that took place over 100 years ago. It's an out there guess, maybe, but until the lore becomes clear, I am both interested and remain guessing. The ancient sages that we see in multiple memories and post-dungeon scenes are interesting. We don't know their names, but I have an idea. The lore surrounding them is a bit mysterious, but they all wear masks, which if you ask me, strongly resemble the divine beasts that were seen in Breath of the Wild. Now, you gotta ask yourself, where did the divine beast names come from? Vah Ruta, Vah Redania, Vah Meadow, Vah Naboris? My guess is that the lore here is that these ancient sages are in fact called Ruta, Redania, Meadow, and Naboris. It would fit well lore-wise, but it is pending confirmation, perhaps with a future DLC pack or just information being shared officially online. Queen Sonia died a tragic death, stabbed in the back by Ganondorf in a horrible betrayal and manipulation. Tears of the Kingdom's title was never more true whilst watching this scene, but there is some touching lore that follows. Queen Sonia's grave can be found within the Forgotten Temple, in that previously mentioned room behind the Hylia statue. We saw Rauru mourning by it in one of the memories, and can still find it in the present day with sundelions growing around it. A truly heartbreaking piece of lore to discover. The connection between Blue Peas and the Lord of the Mountain, Satori, have been clear since Breath of the Wild. However, they serve a new and very cool purpose in Tears of the Kingdom, which has some rather cool lore. Blue Peas can be found near caves, and if startled, they'll actually lead Link to the entrance, which is helpful as some are well hidden. You can also summon the Lord of the Mountain through the cherry blossom trees, which makes sense as that's where we find this magical creature initially as well. In doing so, all nearby caves will be highlighted for a short period of time. I don't think there is an explicitly stated reason for this, but it's new lore on these creatures and I found it really cool. The powers Rauru's hand possesses are insanely powerful, and Link only gets the more tame side of that. Ascend, Fuse, Ultra Hand and Recall are very helpful and powerful, but in comparison to what King Rauru was able to do in the past, they are tame. I found it so interesting that with his hand and presumably some extended form of Zonai magic, that he could actually seal an evil as strong as Ganondorf with his hand. I mean, it's all that remains of Rauru when we first find Ganondorf. Rauru was able to sacrifice his physical form in order to seal the Demon King, and that is amazing. Just like the previous point regarding the Imprisoning War, the timeline placement of this game has been heavily discussed online. However, for me personally, whilst it hasn't been outright stated, it feels obvious. Now, the debates are more focused on if this game takes place in one of the timeline splits, due to the Imprisoning War being brought up once again. However, for me personally, I am very much on board with this game and Breath of the Wild simply taking place as an inevitable outcome of all the past games in the Zelda timeline, in a sense creating its own new, much simpler, linear timeline. I imagine this will be the lore revealed eventually by Nintendo, but at the same time, it doesn't matter all that much. It takes place a few years down the line from the others. I'm happy leaving it there. The Zonai armor is probably my favourite in the game. The Aztec inspiration is so cool, and the actual feeling of having Zonai themed armor still feels a little surreal to me given all of the Zonai speculation leading up to this game. The lore behind it is interesting too. Its description just reads that it is forged from Zonite, which makes sense. However, what's cool is that in Zelda's memories, we see that the Hylians of the time she was sent back to wear this sort of armor, as well as have the Zonai tattoo designs. Presumably this means that in lore terms, even back at this point when the Zonai were just down to Rauru and Minoru, the Hylians embraced Zonai culture. The Great Deku Tree has been a key figure in Zelda lore for a very long time. We've seen multiple of the character, as when one dies, another sprouts. The Deku Tree seen in Tears of the Kingdom is still the same one from Breath of the Wild, but when we first meet him, he's actually infested with gloom, perhaps a small nod to him being infected in Ocarina of Time. Now, as to the actual lore point I've got here, Following Link clearing the gloom out, we actually discover that the Great Deku Tree is not only the resting place for the Master Sword, but he can actually live track the Master Sword as if he's Hyrule's Amazon Prime. I didn't know he was able to do this and found this fact really cool. This next bit of lore is more of just me being a simp. The evil Gerudo women under the rule of Ganondorf are... I'm just gonna say it. They're hot. They're pretty hot. And I consider this serious lore. Evil Gerudo women. Thank you, Nintendo. Coming back to the constructs lore, the bigger piece of lore I alluded to earlier is that they serve a very similar purpose to the ancient robots seen in Skyward Sword. Both ancient machines powered by a form of magic, both programmed for specific purposes. Many fans have started connecting the two, and I believe there could be a big piece of lore here waiting to be confirmed. Whilst their purposes are different and their power sources different, it is possible that they hold some form of connection in how they were made. They are very similar, but I don't think we'll ever get to know for sure. It's just very worth noting. Dondons are an interesting case. We saw one in the reveal trailer for this game being in development, being a part of Link and Zelda's journey to Ganondorf. However, in the final game that Dondon was cut entirely. However, the Dondons as a whole are in the game. You can find a sanctuary in the Faron region, and funny enough, they have a little connection to Luminous Stone still. If you feed them Luminous Stone, they will in time out gems. Prime Zelda Lore. On the topic of crappy Zelda lore, the fun-loving Koroks which we can collect have not only increased, but guess what comes with that increase of seeds to collect? A bigger reward. That's right folks, we're no longer getting Hestu's gift again like we did in Breath of the Wild. We're getting an even bigger pile of shit. Yup, this is Prime Zelda Lore. Brilliant job Nintendo, thanks for that. The lore behind Zelda and Sonia's connection is something I might talk about in its own video at some point. For now, let me highlight why I find it really interesting. So, Sonia says that she can feel the light power within Zelda, as well as her time power. She also senses a blood connection. This does make sense given Rauru and Sonia are the first rulers of Hyrule, and part of the history of the royal bloodline in some way. I would really like to learn more about this, and perhaps in a future video we'll theorise more into this. There isn't time for it in this video, but for now, I'm highlighting it as some very interesting lore. Mipha of the Zora is a beloved character. In Breath of the Wild, she had her own statue in the middle of the domain. However, this statue has been moved in Tears of the Kingdom, and I found this decision interesting. It has been moved to the peak of Ploymus Mountain, which whilst is cool and now has a lot more to it, I can't help but feel it was fine where it was. There is now a Link and Sidon statue at the domain to honour their work in Breath of the Wild, but why couldn't they have been moved elsewhere? Perhaps where the Sheikah Shrine used to be, or even on Ploymus Mountain. It's a cool lore development I guess, but I don't really get it. A big question in terms of lore that fans have been asking and trying to figure out is the time between the ending of Breath of the Wild and beginning of Tears of the Kingdom. The answer hasn't been stated anywhere yet, but there obviously has to be a set time in terms of in-game lore. There are characters such as Riju who have visibly aged from a child in Breath of the Wild to a teenager to maybe young adult age in Tears of the Kingdom. Some characters now have kids who are at least 5+ years old. I would personally put the time difference at around 5 to 8 years between the games. It's a super interesting question regarding the lore, and I would expect it to be answered at some point. Knowing Nintendo, it will be for a random tweet on a random Tuesday. The Master Sword design we saw in the game's title logo didn't really happen. This design made it out as if we'd acquire a part metal, part energy blade. Truth is, the lore of the Zonai-ified Master Sword isn't as cool as that. It's still cool and interesting, but what this design actually turned out to be is the ability to fuse with the Master Sword, which is a rather interesting bit of lore for the Blade of Evil's Bane. Part of me thinks maybe a part energy blade was in mind at some stage, and then later scrapped, but I guess we'll never know. I am happy with the Blade's lore we got though, it's just a shame we cannot upgrade it as of right now. To fit the number 69 spot, let's talk about some lore with one of my favourite new characters, Taro. He's a lot. He's hot. Let's just get that out there. An interesting thing about this guy is that in the lore of this game, he enjoys and would prefer to be naked. I'm not even kidding, read his dialogue again. The man literally says stuff like, Trust me, I understand. If I could run around in nothing but my unmentionables, I just might. Or, otherwise, I wouldn't bother so much with clothing, better to feel the breeze on my skin while I work. His unmentionables? I cannot believe I actually read that in a Zelda game. Please bring this guy back in the next game, Nintendo. Pretty please. The sun rising and setting is changed in Tears of the Kingdom. This might not seem that important, but it does raise some questions in terms of lore. If you go to a spot in this game and observe how the sun rises and sets, then observe from the exact same spot in Breath of the Wild, you'll notice that it is completely different. This has led some fans to believe it means Tears of the Kingdom takes place in a different timeline from Breath of the Wild. I don't personally agree with that take, but it is an interesting one. My take on this is that it has something to do with the upheaval and the effects that took on the land in regards to bringing back stuff from ancient times. In those ancient times, the cycle of the sun rising and setting very well could have been entirely different. That's my take. But this piece of lore in general is pretty interesting and will most likely be a part of some future theories of mine and many others. I loved the magic armor in past games. There have been some cool theories regarding the various iterations of the armor over the years, and Tears of the Kingdom brought it back in the form of the mystic armor. In this game, it definitely has some cool lore. Firstly, it takes on the design of a blupee. Secondly, as magic armor goes, it stops you from losing hearts when damaged, but at some sort of cost. In this case, it drains rupees instead. But what makes that really interesting is that it might actually have the magic or powers of blupees, as when they are hurt, they drop rupees. It seems like whoever made this armor knew how to work with whatever abilities the blupees have. Could this perhaps go even deeper and be connected to the Lord of the Mountain? Perhaps we'll look into that in its own video someday. Returning to the Yiga lore, the fact that Link can now pass Yiga exams to become a qualified Blade Master is crazy cool. Especially when my first video to ever really gain a lot of views was about Link joining them, and then the sequel videos I made. That dates back to 2017 when Breath of the Wild was released, and the fact that Yiga lore now actually has Blade Master exams is so cool to me. There might need to be a new addition to my What If Link Joined the Yiga Clan saga. The process of upgrading the Master Sword is one of the coolest new bits of lore this game brought. Not only is it sent back in time, but Zelda turns into a damn dragon, binding the Master Sword to herself and healing it over thousands of years for Link to retrieve it in the present day. This whole section of lore amazed me, and I just love it. The lore of the Julian Peaks is interesting, as we are told a tale in Breath of the Wild about how it was split down the middle by a dragon. This was just a tale though, a legend and nothing more. Now, in Tears of the Kingdom, this lore has been built on. Not only can we see on the ancient map of Hyrule that the peaks are in fact just one in ancient times, but also with all of the new dragon lore, it seems even more likely to actually be the case that a dragon split this mountain in half. The light dragon, perhaps? Oh man, that would cause some serious timeline, time travel issues in the lore, but I'd secretly love it. Going back to Gloom for a moment, the terrifying Gloom spawn is, well, terrifying. Bloody terrifying. A rather interesting bit of lore about them is that despite being an enemy sourced from Ganondorf, they don't pick up on the camera ruin, as in, they aren't recognised as anything like other enemies are. The lore of the Lightning Temple is something I've been trying to figure out ever since I discovered it. It's my favourite dungeon in the game by far, and it's so cool. I've seen some interesting takes regarding it, but one I actually think might be onto something is that it could actually be the Desert Pyramid that was an urban legend in Ocarina of Time. Another cool potential bit of lore is that we create a golden triangle in order to reveal the temple, possibly in connection to the Triforce. Whatever the case, the lore here is very interesting, going off all of the mystery surrounding it and found within it. The new enemies that have suddenly just appeared are, in lore terms, here due to Ganondorf. These are his servants and they are here to do damage. I just find it cool that there is actual lore to explain these enemies rather than it just being they appeared, or something generic like that. It may have already been known in some ways, but the fact that goddess statues can sense each other and their condition fascinated me. You learn this by talking to the statues found in the springs, and they can all recognise that the statue in the Forgotten Temple is fallen, setting off a little quest as well. Hylia lore is neat lore. A very cool bit of lore which I found out about thanks to the amazing Hyrulean historian is that all gloom weapons actually have the inscription Kotake and Kyume, further adding to that Ganondorf lore earlier discussed. The archaic tunic, which was used in more or less all of this game's promotion, was for a while believed to be Link's new main tunic. However, it's actually just a non-upgradable starter set. However, the lore behind it is interesting, and much like the Zonai armor as previously discussed, we can see Hylians in the ancient past wear this design. It likely originates from this time frame as well, and is described as old-fashioned. It has a very subtle but cool Triforce design as well, which could have some serious lore implications, but it's probably not much more than a style choice based on the Triforce. The dating school that we saw in Gerudo Town in Breath of the Wild was a really cool insight to Gerudo culture and life in this day and age. In Tears of the Kingdom, those classes about meeting and talking to Vo have evolved, and that is really awesome to see. Staying in Gerudo Town, in the bunker beneath the town, we can discover that they once again have a jail. I say once again because in terms of lore, the Gerudo were known for having jail cells, and it turns out, they still do. I doubt this is a reference to past games though, and more of just the development into Gerudo lore in this era of the series. The horse god Melania has moved location just as the Great Fairies have. That in itself is new, but something I found really interesting is what happens when you sleep in a Melania bed at stables. In your sleep, the horse god will actually speak to Link and guide him to find where he is. His services have upgraded a little too, as you can boost your horse's stats by bringing Melania meals. A cool lore development if you ask me. A massive piece of lore about Ganondorf is... who is he? Well, he's the Gandaddy of course, but what I really mean in terms of the game's lore is, if Ganondorf was down here ever since the founding era of Hyrule, sealed beneath the castle the entire time, then how can the other appearances of Ganondorf be explained? If in this new lore, he is explained to have been sealed down here. Well, it may seem problematic at first, but I actually heard a very interesting take online recently that described it as if Ganondorf is a candle, but there can be two flames. Could that be the case in the explanation here? Or is it actually just the new lore contradicting the existing lore? It's interesting regardless. Terry Town is back and better than ever. In Breath of the Wild, we helped build this town, and back in the day, I made a video about the site in which we built, as before the plans had even begun, the site had a goddess statue. But why? Well, Tears of the Kingdom's lore appears to have built on that, as in the depths below there is an abandoned Terry mine. Could this be hinting at the existence of a settlement here prior to Terry Town, as we built it up in Breath of the Wild? I think so, as there needs to be a reason for a goddess statue just being here all alone prior to the town as we built it, ever existing. Following the final dragon tier, we are dropped back off to the Wrist Peninsula, but now surrounded by Silent Princess flowers, the flower associated with Princess Zelda, who is now the Light Dragon. This shows us that Zelda is truly still in there. It's also a cool detail, as Silent Princess can also be found at the Master Sword's usual resting place by the Great Deku Tree. During the Gerudo Assault memory, we see that the smoking hot Gerudo can actually summon what appears to be trained Molduga. This was mentioned to me recently, as this memory basically confirms that Molduga are not evil by nature like bokoblins and other monsters, but rather, they are just territorial creatures which can be dangerous, as you'll know if you've ever gone near one, but they are not actually part of Ganondorf's natural evil monsters. Even in the scene where we see Ganondorf summoning the monsters, no Molduga are there, and it even starts in the Gerudo Desert. The Gerudo trained them to the sounds of this instrument. Zonai is a curious material. It does hold a fair amount of lore, but in a variety of small ways. From the Zonai armor to the Zonai weapons, all the way to being a currency to build with. Sure, it's just a game mechanic, but as a Zelda tuber I am required to overthink things at least a few times a video. It's a type of ore with some sort of energy within it, likely the very same used to forge Zonai charges and crystallized charges. Does this make it a fuel of sorts? I believe so, yes. Going off of that earlier point about how the Master Sword was repaired and strengthened, the power of recall in general is crazy, evidently with how Zelda used it to bring the Master Sword into the ancient past and work her magic. The recall we as Link can use is limited to reversing movement, however when in the hands of Princess Zelda, and presumably others such as Sonia and Rauru, it can be used in different ways such as bringing an object physically through time, without it going back to its place after a set time, like how we can use it. I found the lore behind Recall to be extremely cool, and definitely something that will be considered a big part of Zelda lore going forward. Speaking of which, I could see it being used again, in this way, in some potential future DLC. Bloopy Burrow is a fascinating location found directly below Satori Mountain, which makes sense given we saw the cute creatures in numbers here. Now adding to the lore of the mysterious glowing mountain, we learn that deep below is a burrow packed with these creatures. It's interesting to see them in the depths, and I'm curious if this is in terms of the lore, where they come from. It very well could be, which would be an awesome little addition to their already cool lore. The pirate invaders, which are actually just regular monsters on pirate ships, can be found causing issues up and down the shoreline, most notably in Lurelin Village. This is new lore in itself, but what it makes me wonder is if this is a new development of the monsters, such as their hideout on Eventide Island, or if this has something to do with the upheaval, possibly meaning they acted like this in the ancient past when Ganondorf first invaded Hyrule. It's a cool part of the game, but I do wonder about that. As mentioned earlier, the ancient sages all wear masks. An interesting secret which could extend to lore, and does in my eyes, is that if you wear the divine helmets found in the game, of the 4 main dungeon sages, they'll then equip the sage masks that we saw their ancestors wearing. For me, this further adds to that previous lore speculation I mentioned in thinking the ancient sages' names are that of the divine beast names. This also shows us that in lore terms, there is a connection with these masks. Whilst the Sheikah tech from Breath of the Wild is more or less all gone, there is some new Sheikah tech surprisingly. Whatever powers these new towers is done with some new technology, as seen at the Lookout Landing. This isn't anything major, as I doubt Ganondorf could manipulate this and destroy the kingdom with it, but it's a cool little development. Going back to the beginning of the game, Link and Princess Zelda are investigating the depths of Hyrule Castle to get to the bottom of where the gloom is coming from. All of this was based on the appearance of gloom entering the surface and actually affecting people in ways such as making them ill and weak. Naturally, yeah, you'd go and investigate that, but something I find interesting is that even as a royal, apparently Zelda had no idea there was even anything below the castle. We can find this out by reading Purah's diary, and honestly it is surprising, especially considering the fact the Hyrulean royal family have a bit of a record when it comes to keeping dark secrets from the public. Looking at you, Shadow Temple, aka torture chamber used during the Civil War. Yeah, the Hyrulean royals are pretty brutal and secretive. Surely King Rome and the Queen knew. I just find it odd that Zelda didn't. Now, I obviously don't mean that any of them didn't know about Ganondorf. I'm sure that secret did fall into legend, but there being some form of underground? It's questionable, but hey, it's cool lore. A bit of lore that was in Breath of the Wild, but also returned in Tears of the Kingdom, is this metalwork in the Hyrule Castle throne room. I chose to include this as if you didn't play the previous game or just didn't happen to see this, it's worth knowing as whilst being more of an Easter egg, in lore terms it could hold meaning. This actually shows us the musical notes used for playing Zelda's lullaby back in Ocarina of Time. That song is kept within the royal family and used for various things in Ocarina of Time. So it makes sense that it's been kept within the family, and this is a very cool way of displaying it. Going back to Yiga lore, but on a more serious note, their development really impressed and interested me. I thought it would be tough to bring them back and add more to their existing lore and history, but Nintendo managed to do it with turning the Yiga into a mostly underground operation. They have several bases across the depths, as well as Koga being found a few times for some fun boss battles involving Zonai builds, which is the lore I find the most interesting. The Yiga in this game are trying to figure out Zonai tech to aid Ganondorf in destroying the world, as Koga puts it. This is really interesting to me and will be fun to come back to when working on theories. This next bit of lore might seem a bit obvious, but I suppose not if you haven't cleared the thunderstorm surrounding the Thunderhead Isles. Once the storm is clear, you can see that on the map, from above these islands, actually take on the shape of a dragon, with the head being the same design seen with the Zonai emitters and other Zonai dragon designs. The reward for completing every shrine in the game is lore heavy. Upon completion of the final shrine, you'll be directed to the Temple of Time for a reward. In there, you are given the Ancient Heroes aspect, a one-piece full outfit which envelops Link and changes his appearance to the Ancient Hero. The outfit description reads, "This item is said to contain the spirit of a hero who once saved Hyrule. The hero's aura will envelop the wearer." Though this hero doesn't appear Hylian as you'd probably have guessed, rather green with red hair and a red tail. But then again, it was never said that the spirit of the hero must be within a Hylian, because this hero appears pretty Zonai. What this new lore also extends to is the ancient tapestry seen in Breath of the Wild. So many theories were made on the identity of this heroic figure seen here, questioning why he has red hair and doesn't fully resemble Link as we know him. Well, that's because it clearly isn't. It's whoever this was. Is this perhaps a very ancient Link? Or maybe a completely different character who just also had the spirit of the hero? Whatever the case is, this is some pretty damn interesting lore. We're almost there, folks. The 99th piece of lore I found fascinating, no, mind-blowing, is that dragonification is in fact reversible. Throughout the entirety of this adventure and collecting the memories of Zelda in the ancient past, it was built up so well and insanely emotional that Zelda's sacrifice would be irreversible, but necessary in order to save Hyrule from definite darkness. In the moments following the defeat of Dragondorf, the stunning scene of Link, Rauru and Sonya combining powers in order to reverse Zelda's dragonification was incredible. Normally, I would have been thinking, of course there's a way for Zelda to return and be safe, but Tears of the Kingdom really made me feel like her sacrifice was going to be for good. Obviously this isn't easy to miss, but what is that this technically means dragonification is reversible in general. Not exclusive to Princess Zelda, at least that's fair to assume, and something I didn't really think about at first. Probably because I was way too busy trying not to sob on stream as the main story came to a conclusion. I don't think any of us missed it being reversible with Zelda, but I think the consideration of this being possible for anyone, say the other three dragons we know of, has been a bit missed out on. It's a very interesting thought. Here we are, folks. Number 100. Congratulations to everyone who has endured listening to me for however long this video has gone on for. And before getting into the last point, I just want to say thank you. It means a lot. Now, to end off a grand video like this, the only appropriate way to finish off is to say something a little bit controversial. The final bit of lore that some of you will disagree with, and some of you will agree with, is that Z-Link is now canon. Discuss. Thank you so much for watching this video. It's been really fun to work on this video as I'd been keeping all of these bits and pieces of lore in mind from the very beginning. I'll definitely come back to make dedicated videos focused on some and make some fabulous Zelda theories. For now though, I need a little rest as this video took a lot of effort to put together. I'm off to have my snack or drink and a sleep. A massive shout out goes to my channel supporters as you help to make these videos possible week in, week out, all month long, 365 days a year. Thanks a ton. If you'd like to join them and get yourself a shout out upon joining, a cool badge next to your name in my comments sections, access to exclusive channel emotes if you join via YouTube, as well as your name at the end of every video, then consider supporting via the links below. Thanks for watching. I hope you all have an amazing day or night, and until the next time, I've been Hyrule Gamer.